Coffee was still hot when my phone buzzed. I remember that detail because I'd just poured it. First cup of the morning, standing at my kitchen counter in the oversized sweater I'd stolen from my college roommate years ago and never returned. It was a Saturday. I had nowhere to be. I was thinking about whether I had enough eggs to make an omelet when the notification lit up my screen. A text from my accountant. Sienna, I need you to call me before you do anything today. Do not sign anything. Do not make any transfers. Please call me as soon as you see this. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I read it again. My accountant's name is Frank. Frank DeLuca. He's 62 years old, has wire-rimmed glasses and a cardigan he wears to every single meeting, and in the 4 years he's been managing my finances, he has never once texted me on a Saturday. He sends emails. Formal, numbered emails with subject lines like Q3 summary attached and reminder estimated tax payment due. He does not text. He does not say, do not sign anything. He does not use the word please like it's urgent. My coffee went cold on the counter. I called him back before I even sat down. He answered on the first ring, which told me everything I needed to know before he said a single word, Sienna. His voice was careful in a way that made my stomach drop. I'm glad you called quickly. I need to ask you something and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Have you authorized anyone at all, to make withdrawals from your savings account in the last 18 months? I almost laughed. No, of course not. Why? He was quiet for just a beat too long. Frank, why are you asking me that? Because, he said slowly, someone has been. I should tell you a little about who I am, so you understand what I mean when I say I trusted my sister completely. I'm 31. I work as a project coordinator for a mid-size logistics company based out of Columbus, Ohio. I'm not wealthy. I'm comfortable, which is a different thing. I save carefully. I max out my Roth IRA every year because Frank told me to start when I was 24 and I actually listened. I have a small emergency fund, a modest apartment, a used Honda that I paid off 2 years ago. I don't have a lot, but what I have, I built myself, one direct deposit at a time. My sister is 36, 5 years older than me, which always felt like a lot when we were kids. She was the one who taught me how to drive. She was the one who sat with me in the hospital waiting room when I had my appendix out at 19 and our parents were stuck at a work conference in Phoenix. She's the person I called when I got my first real job offer, when I got my heart broken for the first time, when I needed someone to tell me if my instincts were right or if I was just being paranoid. I don't have a word yet for what she is to me now. I'm still working on that. Her name is Lena. She's the kind of person strangers trust immediately. Warm eyes, easy laugh, the type who remembers your coffee order and asks follow-up questions about things you mentioned in passing 3 months ago. People think she's generous. I thought she was generous. She is, in her own way, just not with things that belong to her. When Frank walked me through what he'd found, I had to ask him to slow down twice. He'd caught it almost by accident. He was reconciling my accounts for an end-of-year review, something he does every December, and he noticed a pattern of small withdrawals from my savings account. Not large enough to trigger any automatic alerts. Not so frequent that they looked obviously suspicious, but consistent. Every few weeks, sometimes once a month, amounts ranging from $200 to $800, transferred to an external account he didn't recognize. How long? I asked. Best I can tell, it started about 20 months ago. I did the math without meaning to. 20 months. I moved to Columbus 22 months ago. Lena had helped me set up my online banking when I switched to a local credit union. She'd sat right there at my kitchen table, laptop open between us, and helped me link my accounts and set up autopay for my utilities. She had been in my account the whole time. I told Frank I needed to call him back, and then I sat on my kitchen floor. I don't know why the floor, but that's where I ended up, and I just breathed for a while. The number he gave me, total estimated, was just over $14,000. $14,000. That's 14 months of my car insurance. That's the security deposit and first month's rent I'd scraped together to move out of my parents' house at 23. That's a number that felt abstract until I started translating it into things I'd worked for and now would never have. I thought about the last 18 months of my life. The times I'd told myself I was being overly cautious with money. The vacation I didn't take because I felt like my savings weren't where I wanted them to be. The new laptop I put off buying for 8 months because something about my account balance felt slightly off, and I'd assumed it was just my anxiety. It wasn't my anxiety. I need to tell you about the week before Frank's text because it matters. I've been at my sister's house for Thanksgiving. She has a nice house, nicer than I ever thought too much about. She lives in a suburb about 40 minutes outside the city, in one of those neighborhoods with mature trees and driveways wide enough for 2 cars. Her husband, my brother-in-law, works in commercial real estate. They have 2 kids, a golden retriever and a kitchen that was renovated 2 years ago with new quartz countertops. She'd seemed normal, happy even. She made a cranberry sauce from scratch and complained cheerfully about the price of butter and asked me if I was seeing anyone. My nephew fell asleep on my lap, watching the game. My brother-in-law opened a nice bottle of wine, and at some point, while we were doing dishes together, my sister had turned to me and said something that I'd filed away without really examining. "Hey, I know this is out of nowhere," she said, not quite meeting my eyes, "but I might reach out this week about maybe borrowing a little money. Just short term, we've got some stuff going on." I'd said, "Yeah, of course, just let me know." She'd nodded and changed the subject. I'd assumed it was something minor. A medical bill. A car repair. I understand now that she was testing the water. Checking if I was still safe to approach. She didn't know Frank had already started looking. I called my best friend first. Her name is Cecily, and I've known her since the 3rd grade, and she is the only person I trusted myself to call before I did something I couldn't take back. "Don't confront her yet," Cecily said immediately. "I know that's not what you want to hear, but do not call her until you know exactly what you're dealing with." She was right. I knew she was right. I wanted to call my sister so badly my hands were shaking. But Cecily talked me off the ledge, and I spent the rest of that Saturday pulling every financial document I could find. Frank and I got back on the phone that afternoon. He walked me through the process of filing a fraud report with my credit union, changing every password and PIN associated with my accounts, and removing the external link that had been draining my money. He also strongly suggested I contact a consumer law attorney before taking any other steps. I found one on Monday. Her name was Darcy, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 40s who had handled financial fraud cases for 12 years. I sat across from her in a conference room and slid Frank's documentation across the table and watched her face as she read it. "This is your sister," she said. Not a question. "Yes." She looked up at me. "You want to know if you have a case. I want to know what I'm actually looking at." She told me. Unauthorized access to financial accounts is wire fraud under federal law. Depending on how the funds were moved and whether any false representations were made, it could also constitute identity theft. The amounts involved put it squarely in felony territory. She said it calmly, the way people say things when they've said them many times before, and learned that calm is what the person sitting across from them needs. I had not expected the word felony. I don't know why. Looking back, I don't know what I expected. I drove home and sat in my car in my apartment parking lot for 20 minutes before I could go inside. Here's what I keep coming back to even now, the question of when I should have known. Lena has always been good with money, or at least, I always assumed she was. She's the one who used to tease me for not knowing the difference between a Roth and a traditional IRA. She's the one who'd looked over my first lease agreement and pointed out a clause about early termination fees I'd missed. She seemed financially capable, financially together. What I didn't look at carefully enough was the gap between how she lived and what she and my brother-in-law likely earned. He has his real estate license, but I know this now because I looked. He's been an independent broker for the last 6 years with inconsistent commissions. She works part-time as an office manager for a pediatric dental practice. The house they live in, the kitchen renovation, the Disney World trip they took with the kids 2 summers ago. The car she drives, none of it is impossible on their income. But none of it is easy either. I'd never asked. She was my older sister. It felt intrusive to ask. And she never volunteered anything because people who are managing a leak don't talk about the leak. I was the leak. I just didn't know it. I called my mother after I met with Darcy. I'm not sure I was ready to, but I knew she deserved to hear it from me before anything official happened. That conversation was one of the hardest of my life. My mother is not an emotional person. She's practical, steady, the kind of woman who responds to hard news by immediately asking what needs to be done. But when I told her what Lena had done, when I got through the part about 20 months and $14,000 and the word felony, I heard her stop breathing for a second. Then she said, very quietly, "I had no idea." And then, "I'm so sorry this happened to you." I believed her. I still believe her. But I also noticed that she didn't say anything about Lena the way I expected her to. No immediate anger, no how could she. Just a stillness on the line that told me my mother was already doing what she always does. Calculating, managing, figuring out how to hold the pieces of her family together. A few hours later, she called me back and asked if there was any way to resolve this without going to the authorities. I'd expected that too. I'd been waiting for it. "No," I said, "there isn't." She was quiet. "Mom, she took $14,000 from me. Over nearly 2 years, she didn't ask. She didn't tell me. She sat across from me at Thanksgiving and let me hug my nephew and eat her cranberry sauce, and she was planning to ask me for more." My mother said she understood. I don't know if she did. Completely. I think she understood with her mind, but not yet with her heart. I think for my mother, the math of what Lena did and the math of what losing Lena would mean were running at the same time, and she was trying to find some calculation that made it add up to something survivable. I've spent a long time being angry about that phone call. I'm trying now to understand it instead. Lena called me on a Tuesday evening, 11 days after Frank's first text. I hadn't reached out to her. Darcy had advised me not to, and I'd followed that advice, which had been one of the harder things I've ever done. Every day I didn't call her felt like holding something heavy in both arms, waiting to put it down. She called like it was a normal Tuesday, like she was checking in. "Hey, just thinking about you," she said. "How's work?" I let her talk for a minute. She asked about a work project I'd mentioned at Thanksgiving. She complained about the cold. She laughed at something her younger kid had done. And then she said, casual as anything, "So, hey, I was going to reach out about that thing I mentioned, about borrowing a little money." I took a slow breath. "Lena," I said, "I know." The silence that followed was unlike any silence I've ever sat inside. It wasn't a confused silence. It wasn't an innocent silence. It was the silence of someone who has been running for a long time and just felt the ground give out under them. "What do you mean?" she said. Her voice had changed. "I know about the account. I know about the transfers. Frank found it." She didn't say anything for a long time. Long enough that I checked my phone to make sure the call was still connected. Then, "Sienna, I can explain." "Please don't," I said. "Not right now. I need you to listen." And then I told her what was going to happen next. Darcy's advice. I was filing a formal complaint with the credit union and cooperating with whatever investigation followed. I'd already submitted documentation. I wasn't making any decisions about pressing charges yet. That was still up in the air. But the process was in motion and I would not be stopping it. She started crying. I expected that too. She said she was sorry, that things had gotten out of hand, that she'd meant to pay it back, that she didn't know how it had gotten so far. I listened to all of it. I didn't interrupt. When she was done, I said, "I believe that you're sorry right now. I also know that you were planning to ask me for more money 11 days ago. Those two things are both true." She didn't have an answer for that. The investigation took 4 months. There were phone calls with fraud investigators, documents to notarize and return, a meeting at the credit union's main branch that felt very formal and very strange. Darcy walked me through each step. Frank provided everything he compiled. It was methodical and slow and nothing like I'd expected a legal process to feel. Less dramatic, more paperwork. In the end, my sister was required to make full restitution as part of a civil settlement that kept the matter out of criminal court. She paid back the full $14,000 plus legal fees plus interest. I don't know exactly how they managed it, whether they borrowed from someone, sold something, drained their own savings. I didn't ask. That wasn't my concern anymore. She was not arrested. She did not face criminal charges. That decision was mine to make, and I made it thinking about my nephew falling asleep on my lap and my niece's gap-toothed smile at Thanksgiving, and I decided I could live with civil resolution if it meant the money came back. I don't know if that was the right decision. I'm not sure there is a right decision in a situation like that. There's just the one you make and then carry. It has been almost a year since Frank's text. I talk to my mother regularly. We don't talk about Lena unless one of us brings it up, which is rare. My mother sent me flowers on my birthday and wrote a card that didn't say anything about any of it. Just that she was proud of me, and I cried in my kitchen for about 15 minutes and then felt oddly better. I have not spoken to my sister since the settlement was finalized. She sent me a letter, handwritten, 4 pages, that I've read twice and am not ready to respond to. Maybe I will at some point. Maybe I will, at some point. I'm trying to stop making promises to myself about timelines. Cecily took me to a cabin in the Hocking Hills for a long weekend in September, and we hiked and drank wine, and she didn't bring it up once unless I did. That was exactly right. She knew it was exactly right. I have a new savings account at a different institution. I check it every week, which Frank says is more than necessary, but I can't quite make myself stop. The balance is lower than it would have been, obviously, but it's going in the right direction. I've started putting a little extra aside each month, slowly building back what I lost. The thing I keep turning over, the thing I haven't been able to set down, is the question of whether I'm angrier at what she took or at how long I trusted her, because those are different griefs. The money I can rebuild, the version of my sister I believed in, the one who remembered my coffee order and taught me to drive and sat with me in hospital waiting rooms, that's harder to account for. That's a loss I'm still learning the shape of. A lot of people, when I've described this to them, ask me if I feel guilty. Guilty for reporting her. Guilty for letting it go as far as it did legally, even in the civil direction. And I understand why they ask, because I asked myself the same thing, but the honest answer is no. The guilt I feel is for the things I couldn't control, for not catching it sooner, for trusting, which is not actually something I want to stop doing even now. What she did was not something I could have handled quietly. Some things cannot be managed inside a family. Some things cross a line that a family dinner table is not equipped to address. I needed Frank and Darcy and the credit union's fraud team and Cecily talking me off my kitchen floor on a Saturday morning. I needed a process outside the warmth of family loyalty, because family loyalty is exactly what she was counting on. And the thing I've decided, the thing I come back to when the guilt does show up, when I lie awake at 3 in the morning wondering if I made the right calls, is this: I was transparent. I chose to face it clearly and name it honestly instead of protecting a version of my family that wasn't real anymore. I don't know what Lena is going to do with the next chapter of her life. I genuinely hope she figures something out. I hope she gets whatever help she needs, financial or otherwise, because I don't think people do what she did out of simple greed. I think people do what she did when they are desperate and ashamed and very bad at asking for real help. I was someone she could have asked for a real amount, with real honesty, and I would have tried to help her. That's the part that still gets me, on the quiet mornings when the coffee is hot and my phone is sitting on the counter. Not what she did with the money, but that she never just asked me for it. She could have asked. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened, not in any mystical sense, just the plain, unglamorous truth that what we do quietly, in private, when no one is watching, eventually surfaces. It always does. Lena moved money in small amounts precisely because she knew large ones would trigger alerts. She was careful. She was patient. And for 20 months, it worked. But careful and patient only delay the reckoning. They don't prevent it. Frank wasn't even looking for fraud when he found it. He was doing a routine year-end review. That's how it goes. The thing you think you've buried well enough is usually sitting right at the surface, waiting for someone with fresh eyes. I think about my own role in it too. Not with guilt, but with honesty, which I think is different. I trusted Lena because she had earned that trust over 31 years of being my sister. That's not naivety, that's just what trust looks like when it's real. But I also didn't ask questions I probably should have asked, not about her finances specifically, but about the patterns I noticed and dismissed. The balance that felt off. The unease I wrote off as anxiety. I've learned that your instincts are a form of intelligence, and ignoring them repeatedly is a choice, even when it doesn't feel like one. What I keep coming back to is how much of the story is actually about courage. Not the dramatic kind, not standing in a courtroom or confronting someone in a crowded room. The quiet kind. The kind that shows up on a Saturday morning when you're sitting on your kitchen floor trying to decide whether protecting the truth matters more than protecting the image of your family. I chose the truth. That decision wasn't clean or easy, and it didn't feel heroic in the moment. It felt like grief. But I made it with my eyes open, and I can live with it. There's something in what Sienna's story, in what my story, asks of you. If you've ever been in a version of it, it asks you whether you're willing to see clearly when seeing clearly is the harder option. It asks whether you can separate the person you love from the thing they did. Those aren't the same question, and they don't have the same answer, and you can hold both at once without it destroying you. I rebuilt my savings. Slowly, in the same boring way I built them the first time. Direct deposit, automatic transfers, checking the balance more than Frank says I need to. I'm still working on rebuilding the other thing. The version of my sister I thought I knew. Some losses don't come with a settlement figure. You just carry them, and gradually they get lighter, and one day you realize you've been carrying them so long that they become just a part of the weight of being alive and loving people. I'm still glad I trusted her for most of the years that I did. And I'm still glad I stopped.